Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Lanterns Season 1 Episode 2. It's called Trustfall, so spoilers for the episode as will be always going forward. So yeah, I was excited to get to Episode 2. A lot of potential in Episode 1 and I think this piqued my interest in a number of ways as a Green Lantern fan. There was a lot of things mentioned or brought up, both in terms of just little casual Easter egg references like mentioning Mogo, for example. Which is a sentient planet that is a Green Lantern. Not the planet that the Green Lanterns are, like, based on. That's Oa. Oa is the Green Lantern home base. Mogo is a planet who is a Green Lantern. Anyway, now that I've explained that to you. But no, we're talking about Manhunters and the idea that what the aliens were looking for in the town is a Manhunter. We also get a mention of Sinestro, which popped me huge, and then of course that's almost irrelevant because by the end of the episode we actually get to see Sinestro. We get to see the sign cells on Oa, which is the planet that Hal went to. Unless they've changed stuff for the TV show, this should be Oa, where he's went. So yeah, lots of exciting Green Lantern lore stuff to talk about, and the central mystery of someone in the town being a Manhunter. Right, that's the big thing that comes up. I mean, I'm skipping ahead here quite a bit, but it's the interesting part. So we're going to start with that, which is that John Stewart, when he goes to collect the lantern for Hal at his home, gets nabbed by some people who turn out to be aliens, working with the people who were in the town who were killed, and they kind of explain to John what they're doing and why they're there, and that is to hunt down a Manhunter. The Manhunter who, I mean, they explain kind of vaguely what the Manhunters are, that they existed before the Lantern Corps did. They existed before that. No one knows where they came from, but they're synthetic. They can disguise themselves or build new bodies to blend in with any race. So one was left on their planet and basically secretly built up a Holocaust. That's how he describes it. And they seemingly sort of pumped the experience of living through this into John's head, so he just understands why they feel the way they do. Even though I'm sure he would have got the gist of it just from the explanation, but hey, they make him feel it so that he's at least up to speed with it. And yeah, they talk about this Manhunter who is, they believe is disguised in the town, and they kind of say as much here, although Hal also theorizes this a little bit later. The idea being that Abin Sur was the Green Lantern who took the Manhunter from their planet and promised that the Manhunter would be executed. But one way or another, they ended up on Earth, and it's the Manhunter who killed Abin Sur. At least that's what Hal theorizes. And he's now been in disguise in this town ever since. There's a Manhunter hiding on Earth in this town. Now, as soon as they said this, and as soon as they said, we have to find this Manhunter, and if you've got 48 hours, because you can go into that town, we can't, we'll be detected, more than that, from the other plot later. But you won't be detected, so you find out who this person is, ID the Manhunter, and relay it back to us. And if you don't do that in a couple of days, we're going to just come in and we're all just going to detonate like that guy did in the police station, and the entire town will be a crater. Now, we would rather not kill a bunch of innocent people, but we will just to make sure we get the Manhunter. So they've set up a very simple mystery here, is that someone is secretly an alien, and potentially a very, very dangerous evil alien who did a lot of bad things. Now, I do think there's a lot of room for twists and turns about, you know, what this Manhunter actually did. Now, is the Manhunter actually responsible for what they're saying he did? I think there could be a little bit of wiggle room there, especially if Abin Sur was intentionally misleading them. That said, though, if it went down the way Hal just assumes it did, which is the Manhunter just killed Abin Sur, then yeah, maybe he is just a dangerous criminal that took out the you know, Abin Sur and then has blended in here on Earth for whatever reason. But this mystery is nice and simple, which is someone is secretly the Manhunter, and we have to figure out who, which immediately gets us into the territory of, well, who is it, right? Have we met them? Because the first thought I had in my head is this mysterious benefactor who is funding Macon, right? Kerry McDonald's father-in-law, and his compound, and the fact that he has fancy alien technology from someone. The first thought is his mysterious benefactor is the Manhunter. If not him himself is the Manhunter. But I was like, well, yeah, but is that too simple? I was also thinking in the middle of the episode that, oh, maybe the benefactor is Sinestro. and that's who is funding all this stuff, and that's obviously its own little can of worms. Now, do I still think that based on where it goes by the end? I mean, maybe Sinestro seems to know who Jon Stewart is, which maybe suggests that he has contacts on Earth who are feeding him information. So if he is the benefactor, even though he's doing it from a prison cell on Oa, maybe that's how he's getting that information back, because that's kind of the bombshell at the end, is he knows about Jon Stewart. But that's getting into who the benefactor is, and if the benefactor is indeed the Manhunter. I think that's less likely, not even because there's like a premise problem with that, or because it wouldn't make sense, more just from like a TV writing perspective. It feels like the benefactor also being the Manhunter would be less interesting. I'm more inclined to think the Manhunter is someone who's not outwardly villainous, and one of the first names that kind of popped into my head in a lot of ways was the sheriff. It was Kelly Macdonald's character for a couple of reasons. Now, she does mention in this episode that she's from Gotham, which did kind of stick out to me. Her name is Kerry Kane. Now, I'm not saying that she's actually related to Kate Kane in that branch of the Wayne family, but the name did stick out. I don't think that's a strange thing to maybe consider. There's also a character in DC Comics called Kate Spencer, who goes by the name Manhunter. Now, that's not necessarily that related to the Green Lantern Manhunters, but still, the thought did cross my mind that maybe we're going to get a real name reveal for her, and, you know, why... I mean, she talks about being in this town for a long time and earning respect, and kind of chews out Hal for undermining it, and he seems to be actually apologetic for that. But still, it remains to be seen, is there some other element to her past that we're not getting into yet. And then on top of that, I think you also have the other candidate here, another woman, funnily enough, is Macon's wife, the one that John slept with last episode. Like, she talks about being with Macon. Now, she does say she loves him and that he loves her, but she does say that, you know, there's benefits to being with this man who has this power, who has a compound, who has this level of security, and it's like, hey, are you an alien hiding out and you're using this as a way? That said, though, Macon obviously hates aliens, so like, if the benefactor's alien, or if his wife's an alien, does he know about either of those things? If either of those are true, they may not be true. Either of those things might be true. Maybe it's not so much that he hates aliens in general, but he hates specific type of aliens, or at the very least, he's protecting the Manhunter. So therefore he hates, or he's going after any aliens who are, because that's the other thing about this episode, is Hal does a whole thing where he realizes the metal detectors at the football stadium aren't detecting metal, and he tests it in a number of ways. What's weird is he takes through like the front of the car, like he sort of rips off the emblem part of the front of the car, and he carries that through, but he uses a tire iron to do it, and all I could think was, the tire iron would have been a sufficient big enough metal object to test the metal detector, right? I don't know why he needed something that was much bigger than that, but he eventually goes and steals the alien corpses from the morgue and carries them through, and that sets off the detectors. The other hint for this is that the metal detector at the town hall, which he goes and crashes the meeting at, that also doesn't go off for his belt buckle or anything else. So it's this idea that he kind of puts two and two together and realizes that these detectors are set up to detect aliens, and that's why Macon's men knew who to shoot. Because that's what he brings up when Kelly Macdonald's husband comes over to talk to him. He sort of questions, like, I came here on a gut feeling that there was aliens involved in this incident, but Macon's men shot 4 people, and you don't just shoot 4 people on a gut feeling, which suggests to me that they knew something, or they had more information about what was going on, and they knew that there were aliens. And seemingly that's partially answered by these detectors, but of course, why did they put these detectors in? Macon goes on about how, like, people who originally lived here, like, were basically just, the land was robbed from them, from the people who arrived. I'm not going to fall at the same crime. I'm waiting for anyone coming, and I've got defenses in place and all that. And then has his man shoot Hal for trespassing. But yeah, one of the things that I will say about this episode, actually, is that I thought the chemistry with the characters was still quite good. In particular, there's a lot of Hal and the sheriff going backwards and forwards. Between her frustrations that he's robbed these dead bodies, and that he wants to go talk to her father-in-law, and then him waking up in the hospital and the banter that happens there, it's pretty good, right? Her getting frustrated at the town hall meeting that he's interrupting, I was feeling the humor and the kind of the agitation that she was feeling, and I was enjoying the bouncing backwards and forwards. So I didn't even mind that Hal and John were separated for the majority of this episode. So I appreciate that was still kind of compelling throughout, regardless. And then the John stuff, obviously, there's some jokes about like Hal's pet, which is like an alien plant, whatever. I wasn't necessarily that fussed about that. John holding up the costume though, and kind of looking at it in the mirror as if, oh, I can see myself in this, and putting his hand in the box, which is actually a pocket dimension to get the lantern. We get to see the lantern, of course, which needs a recharge. Which, by the way, Hal almost makes John fly with the ring. He fails to do so, right? He doesn't really give him enough inspiration. But all I could think was, well, if he had flown, if John did manage to get off the ground and was flying in the air, like 5 seconds later, the ring was going to turn off because it was out of charge. And we see that happen to Hal. So to be fair to Hal, I suppose, he puts himself in that position even though he knows it's almost dead. So it seems less like he's trying to like hurt John and more just that he's just that irresponsible with his ring charge, right? He lives his life with his phone on 5% battery, it seems, and he's just that type of guy. But yeah, I mean, John's whole journey in this episode, like, I think when he gets like blindsided at Hal's place, and there's a bunch of jokes about Hal having this big house and him meeting a bunch of popes and presidents and whatnot, but when he gets taken, I wasn't necessarily all that impressed with the scene he was taken in, but the scene in the van afterwards where he gets into a fight, and when they actually like go bursting out the back of the van, it's actually a really cool shot where we go from inside the van and realize that we're on a busy highway, right? We're not just on a quiet road, we're not just in the countryside or anything like that. They go out into traffic, and we get what feels like a fairly expensive scene for a TV show to do, of cars swerving, hitting each other, jumping over cars. It's also here, I think, we really get the sense that these guys that are trying to grab him are aliens because they're kind of jumping over the cars in ways that are just a little bit unhuman. And sure enough, that's all cleared up once they grab him again and they do the whole Manhunter speech. Which John does choose to tell Hal about. You can tell that he's considering not doing it. He's, you know, when he bumps into the wife again at a diner on his way back to town, he does talk about not knowing if he can trust Hal, and he's not really sure about it. But he does make the choice to ask about Manhunters, which Hal immediately says, "How do you know about that?" And he's like, well, these guys grabbed me, they were working with these other aliens, and explains everything out. And Hal looks a little bit perturbed by all this, which is what leads to him in the middle of the night putting on his suit, flying off to Oa and going to see Sinestro, almost Hannibal Lecter style. And he's like, Sinestro, tell me about these Manhunters. What the hell do you know about them? And Sinestro's like, well, why don't you tell me about Jon Stewart? Also something about if there is a Manhunter, that is the second biggest threat you're facing right now. Which when he said it, I thought he meant himself. Like, I thought he meant, oh no, I'm still your biggest threat. I'm Sinestro, right? Don't forget that. But then he says, tell me about Jon Stewart, which was almost like he was maybe implying that the biggest threat to him right now is his replacement. Not because he's going to try and convince Hal John's evil or something. I don't think that's what he means by that, though. But no, this was a cool ending. I did get excited seeing Sinestro and going to Oa, and just the visual of him flying through space was just so different from anything else in the first, couple episodes thus far, that it really was a nice little jolt of excitement to see it. I always like when Green Lantern's a bit more Earth-based and we get like little sprinkles of the space stuff. I think sometimes I get frustrated in the comics when we just spend what feels like years in space without ever going back to Earth. It just feels a little bit too wishy-washy. The supporting cast of like people around the characters can't really blossom or anything like that. So I actually kind of like that this is a bit more Earth-focused, but it does make it more exciting when they do pop up to space for something. We've not seen a Guardian yet, although John keeps asking what the Guardians are saying about this shit. So no, I like the ending quite a bit, and I do think that the mystery they've set up is compelling, and much like what I said with episode 1, I appreciate that the mystery that they're building it around is all based on Green Lantern lore. It's all like, the mystery of who's a Manhunter, and they did these bad things in the past, and now we're straight up talking about the fact that Sinestro, like, a lot of that story has happened. When Kelly MacDonald's reading off the wiki or whatever she's looking at, she's like, hey, you were saying Sinestro in your sleep. And here it says he used to be a Lantern, but he tried to do a coup. and you're the one who took him down. And Hal's like, I don't want to talk about that. He gets very serious about it. So I think that's very interesting, and I'm curious to know, like, okay, he tried to take over, he tried to do a coup, but was there any Yellow Lantern stuff involved with that, or Yellow Ring stuff involved with that? Because for those of you who don't know, in the comics, after defecting from the Green Lanterns, he starts the Yellow Lantern Corps, which is the Sinestro Corps, which is, you know, if green's willpower, right, that's what the green means, yellow means fear, and he becomes the leader of that corps. And it doesn't seem like that's happened here. It seems like he tried to do the coup in a more sort of traditional sense, and I wonder if, like, the events of this season or something in the future, whatever it may be, I do wonder if, like, they're going to build to when he eventually gets out of that prison cell, if that's when we're going to get to the Yellow Lantern Corps being a thing, if they go down that path. But I was definitely thinking about it. I was like, oh, what's going on here? So I think that was a fun thing to bring up. I like the reason the first time we ever hear the word Sinestro is her saying you were saying it in your sleep, implying from the get-go that this is a traumatic, like, bit of his history, that Hal's, like, you know, is Hal's nemesis, because that's what he is. He's Hal's nemesis, and this is something that is haunting him. So, and then you get the Hannibal Lecter style scene in the prison cell at the end. So I'm deeply excited about that stuff, and like the growing trust and all that. I suppose the other thing we should mention here is the bird. I wanted my bird. John Stewart, when he tries to fly, he creates a little green bird instead. And Hal looks a little bit shook that even when he takes the ring back, that bird is still on John's shoulder. And he says, all right, here's a test. If you can keep that bird, you know, that construct alive and consistent until you get back, you've passed the test. But he does seem a little bit shook that that's still going. And even not the Manhunters, sorry. They're definitely not Manhunters. The aliens who are looking for the Manhunters, he even says, hey, that construct's quite good. Like, how's Hal projecting that from the other city? And John's like, he's not, I am. And it is kind of setting up that John is maybe very gifted with the Green Lantern constructs. Yeah, he couldn't fly yet, but it seems like he does have this affinity for it. And the fact that he has the willpower to keep this bird around, even when he's not tied to the ring specifically, is quite interesting. And it maybe suggests that, at least in this TV show, they're going with this idea, yeah, that the ring creates the construct, but it can stick around as long as the person who made it can actually keep it there with their willpower. It doesn't necessarily need to be constantly fueled by the ring in some way, which I've never really thought about it that way from the comics or anything like that, but I don't hate it as an idea. It does make it kind of feel like some people could be more special at it than others, at the very least. So interesting to see. But yeah, the bird sticks around. Even though he gets knocked out and he's unconscious, that bird stays around all episode until Hal questions why a bird, what's so important about this bird. And John says it's just a bird, and then he sort of disintegrates it in his hands and makes the construct go away. But part of me also thinks that maybe Hal's onto something. Maybe there is something from his backstory that this bird's tied into that he doesn't want to talk about. In the same way that Hal didn't want to talk about Sinestro. And I'm not suggesting that this bird is John's nemesis. I'm not suggesting that. But more just maybe a traumatic memory in the military. Maybe this bird was there. Maybe he saw a bird after he had to kill someone that was a tough moment in his life. Or maybe something with his dad, like, you know, torture training him when he was a kid. Maybe that bird showed up or something. Maybe he had to shoot a bird. And maybe his dad made him kill a bird, and it's been this traumatic memory in his head his entire life. I don't know, but I did appreciate that. So, yeah. And obviously making xenophobia is still very much there. The whole, like, I'm not getting caught off guard, all the rest of it. Definitely felt like it was still feeding into those themes from before. But you also have this idea that the aliens who are even here looking for a Manhunter is because someone came to their world and ruined it. So we're definitely playing with those themes of outsiders coming in and the results those outsiders have. So, yeah, it's interesting. So we have two mysteries here. Now, it could end up being one and the same, but the two mysteries at this point are the benefactor who is funding Macon and his compound and giving him advanced alien technology that even Hal doesn't recognize very well, and who is the Manhunter. as of right now, I think those are two separate things, because I think there's more fun stuff they can do if they're two separate characters. But at the same time, it would make sense. Like, I acknowledge that it would make sense if the benefactor is the Manhunter, or if making himself as the Manhunter, him being so protective and building a bubble around himself with all these armed guards and stuff makes some sense, because he knows that people are going to be coming for him. So it would make sense if they're the Manhunter, but I suspect there's going to be someone else at play here. I don't know who it could be. Like, even just like if I'm thinking from the comics and I'm trying to think of like who's kind of on the villainous side, who would be given stuff to characters. Like, honestly, the first name that comes to mind, mainly because he's rich and he does a lot of experimenting and tries to research alien tech, but he's not an alien himself, is Hector Hammond, who's a Green Lantern character. That name did pop into my head. I'm not convinced it is Hector Hammond who's funding all this stuff. Although Hal did go on a nice little rant about how you're this, like, you know, old school cowboy with conservative values, but you're really, really worshipping this NDA. That seems a little out of character for the type of personality that you put forth into the world, which I did think was quite amusing. So yeah, I am compelled by the mystery, and this episode's a little bit shorter, which meant it was a little bit tighter, which is good. So I would say this was mostly a success, this episode. You know, I think them not trying to do the thing where Macon's kind of being friendly with Hal, I'm glad that's already over and we're already kind of an antagonist level, because he was much less interesting trying to be a friend. I don't know, because it felt so shallow. It felt like, oh, we're seeing through this. He's obviously going to be a threat later. And it's not like the show was even hiding that, but it just kind of felt like we were waiting for the turn to happen. And it's like, okay, we're already kind of there, where it's like, no, he's an antagonist. We have to deal with him and get on to like whatever other alien technology he's got on that compound that we want to get to. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the mystery. I like the lore that's kind of seeping in. I said this in episode 1, I said it in the Superman movie, I love how established this lore already is. I love that a lot of the early Sinestro stuff has already happened, and they're selling it as a big deal because of how Hal is reacting to it being brought up. Like, the way he reacts to that name sells it as important, sells it as this thing. And I appreciate that. It's a really smart tactic, actually. To me, if you've got like years and years and years, decades of comic book lore, and even if you say, okay, modern Green Lantern lore kind of reset a lot in the mid-2000s, and we'll be kind of working off that sense, that's still 20 years. It's still 20 years of stuff that you can use, and that's not even including the origin stuff, which obviously all predates that. So I love this idea of saying that some of it just happened before the show. So we can actually say, because it just instantly makes the backstory so enriched, because there's so much of it that is based on a lot of very deep material that you can draw on, but then you can get to the stuff that you're actually doing in the show, which is kind of using it to build your own story, even though I do think it is going to sort of, you know, do things from the comics in some ways as it goes forth. So I'm excited to see how they play with that. And then just on like a regular TV show level, the chemistry was good between the characters. This one, particularly Hal and Sheriff Kane. I think I was enjoying their banter, her getting frustrated at him, and finally him being an asshole, but given like a little bit of an inch. Also worth mentioning, the hospital's weirdly unused, and most of the stuff inside it is like still wrapped up as if it's never been used. And she's like, oh, it's a small town, not a lot of patients. Well, why is the hospital so big then? Why not just have a little medical center? Some interesting questions that he's posing that I'm sure are going to be relevant down the line. But yeah, chemistry's good. John's very compelling, even on his own. Although I am excited for him to be with Hal a bit more next episode. But no, cool. Yeah, I think episode 2 was good. I think like, you could maybe critique a little bit of the pacing still, I guess, but not by much. Like, I think this was better paced than the first episode by far. So, hey, they got a dick in the episode as well, because HBO, we got to do a naked cadaver, which, it wasn't sexual in any way, but it's just like, hey, we're on HBO, we can show that, so we're going to do it. But yeah, that's my thoughts on episode 2 of Lanterns. It's very good. Every time I go to talk about this show, I almost just call it Green Lantern, because that's what it is. But the show's called Lanterns, so I need to try and remember. But yes, and obviously we only get a little hint of the guy playing Sinestro, Ulrich Thompson. But I was not upset with the performance. They didn't go too over the top with the forehead. It was definitely more realistic as far as the forehead goes. But he's definitely got that sort of pink-red tint to his skin, so it is unrecognizable with a little mustache and everything. I'm excited for more of this, and I'm wondering just how much we do, because obviously this episode didn't do any more of the other time periods. It was all 2016. So I'm curious to see if we kind of shake that up and do a lot more 2026 stuff in a future episode. Maybe not the next one, but certainly in the future. But we got a timer now. We got to find who the Manhunter is. They've got a goal. They've got a clear, definable thing to do, and that should do wonders for momentum. As long as it feels like they're really trying to throughout the next episode. So. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Thanks to everyone who already does. It really does make everything here possible, as well as the movie channel, Mail Fuzz Movies, where all the movie podcasts live. If you haven't went and checked out the 3-hour Superman review from last year that me and David did, I encourage you to do so. It was a long conversation. So thank you for joining me. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?